Well, hello. Hope you're well. Thank you for joining us for the online message this weekend at Deep Rivers Church. We had a good day this morning. It's Saturday as I record this, and we've already decorated the building for Christmas and even raked out some leaves and put out some new mulch this morning. So the place is looking good. If you haven't been here for a while, I hope you can come join us sometime and see the decorations. We decorated the building for Christmas because Advent is here. Actually, it might be a little bit of a surprise, but the way the calendar fell, Advent, the first week of Advent, is actually this weekend. And I didn't grow up in a church that really made a big emphasis out of Advent, but I think there's something to be said for kind of taking a deeper dive in exploring what these 4 words of Advent are. And that's what we're going to be doing for the next 4 weeks till Christmas comes. We're going to dive into the 4 words of Advent. Now, if you're on our email list, and I'm assuming that you are if you're watching this because we email you the link, every Friday, I'm going to email out a link to a short video from the Bible Project, which is kind of a warm-up or a precursor for that weekend's message. This weekend, we're talking about the word hope. And if you are on top of your email, you might have noticed that yesterday you got an email from me with the video on hope, and even some of the folks that were here this morning helping to decorate were telling me about watching their video. So hope is the first word of Advent. It's the word we're going to talk about this weekend. Now, hope obviously is a nice word. Some people name their kid Hope. If you have a daughter named Hope, boy, it's inspirational. For a first name or even a lot of middle names probably. So obviously hope is a nice word, but sometimes almost hope, I hate to say it, has a little bit of a negative side to it. Like, oh, I hope this happens. And hope kind of can be associated with desperation at the same time. So we're going to take a little bit of a dive this weekend, I should say, into what the word hope really means. Now we think of it as, I got this definition, anticipating a future that is better than the present or a state of anticipation. And that certainly is true. But it's also true that it's crucial for healthy human existence to have a sense of hope. And it's also a very important concept in the Bible. We are to be hopeful people. We are to live in a state of anticipation. In the Old Testament, there's 2 main Hebrew words that kind of convey this idea of hope. And I probably won't pronounce these words correctly, and it really doesn't matter if I do or don't. But the first word is yakal, Y-A-K-H-A-L, in our English, wakal, yakal. And it's to wait for. We don't think about hope and waiting, but the definition of these 2 words for hope is, the first one is yakal, and it means kind of to wait for. Genesis 8, 6 through 12, says Noah had to yakal for weeks so the flood waters to recede. If you know the story of Noah and the ark, after it stopped raining, they had to yakal. They had to wait for the waters to recede before they landed on land. The second word is kavah. It also means to wait. So these 2 words about hope are tied to this idea of waiting. And but also means to wait. It's related to another Hebrew word, kav, Q-A-V, which means cord or rope for us. When a kav or a rope is pulled tight, there's a state of tension until the release. Think about a bungee cord. You got a bungee cord stretched. There's a state of tension until it's released. And that is the idea of hope. It's a feeling of tension and expectation as you wait for something to happen. So Isaiah said this, Isaiah 28, 24 through 29. He said this in effect, God is the farmer who plants vines and kavahs for good grapes. He waits with an expectation and anticipation for good grapes. God is the farmer who plants us, but then he waits, kavah, for the good grapes. Micah even said that farmers can kavah and yakah at the same time. Farmers kavah and yakal for the morning dew to moisten the land. So you can wait for with patience, like Noah sitting in the boat, waiting for the floodwaters, but you can also wait with a sense of anticipation and tension. Now, hope in the Old Testament, it kind of casts as a waiting expectation. As the nation of Israel was sinking into self-destruction, Isaiah said this, "At this moment the Lord's hiding his face from Israel, so I will kavah for him." So again, waiting and hope tied together. Hope is this waiting expectation. Now, the only hope that Isaiah had in those dark times was the hope for God himself. That's what's so great about this phrase, I will kavah for him. I will wait for him. In the Psalms, the same notion is seen over and over and over again. Over 40 times, people are seen waiting for God. Psalm 130 says this. The writer of the Psalm 130 cries out, kind of in a pit of despair. He says, I kavah for the Lord. He's waiting with an expectation. There's tension. Let Israel yakal for the Lord, because he's loyal and redeem Israel and will redeem Israel from its sins. So there's this idea of hope. This is an idea of waiting, but sometimes waiting with attention. It's also very, very important to remember that the first one, in this biblical hope, it's waiting on a certainty. Hope is waiting on a certainty. It's not wishful thinking. It's not wishing for something. It's waiting on something. It's waiting on God, hopefully. So the biblical hope, it's waiting on a certainty, not just wishing for something. The second thing is biblical hope is based on a person. It's based on God. It's not optimism. Now, optimism is great. I'm not down on optimism. I think we could all be a little bit more optimistic. But optimism is choosing to see how circumstances can work out. Optimism is, the glass is always half full. Optimism is always thinking, how can the best come from this? And there's nothing wrong with that. But hope and optimism, while related, they're certainly not the same. Biblical hope is not focused on situations. It's focused on God and his character. That's a key. Hope, biblical hope, is not based on circumstances and situations. It's based on God and his character. Hope for people in the Bible, they have a lot of hope, but oftentimes they see no evidence that things will get better. But they choose hope. So hope, obviously, is a decision. Hosea said this, it was in another dark time. Israel's oppressed by foreign armies and empires, and yet he chose hope. Isaiah 2:15. There I will give her back her vineyards, and will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. There she will respond as in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. So that's Hosea 2:15. God could turn this valley of trouble into a door of hope, just like when Israel came up out of Egypt. God had surprised his people with redemption back in the days of the Exodus, and he could do it again. If we're going to be hopeful people, we also need to be keenly and certainly aware of his past faithfulness. God and his past faithfulness fuels our hope. So Wednesday night, we had a Thanksgiving Eve service. Thanks for everybody who came. We had a great time. A lot of folks, a lot of dessert, too much dessert. And we talked about the importance of remembering. We took some time to try to, and I'll encourage you to do this as well. Try to remember the places that are important to you, the places that are special to you. It might have been a place you went on vacation. It might have been a place you spent time with family or friends or Christian camp growing up. Or be thankful about God's faithfulness in the places that he's allowed you to experience. The people in your life, we need to be recognizing how he's been faithful to us in providing us with people and even the experiences. So we spent some time Wednesday night just kind of reflecting and remembering on the places, the people, and the experiences. But we also spent some time about why it's important for us to remember, because, again, God and his past faithfulness, again, I'll say it again, it fuels our hope, because our hope is in him. We actually talked about it real quick. We didn't spend a lot of time on it Wednesday, but remember and encourage us to persevere. We need to be a people that perseveres. Our past experiences kind of are mild markers to help us keep moving forward. We also talked real quickly about remembering what God has done for us as a witness to the coming generations. For our family, they need to see God's faithfulness in the past. It's remembering is also a witness to the lost world. It's important for the world to know what we're celebrating and what we're remembering. And remembering also, maybe most importantly, helps us renew a personal commitment to God. God and his past faithfulness fuels our hope. It's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I think it's important to remember. We actually looked at this passage in Joshua 24. It says, Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. He summoned all the elders, leaders, judges, and officials of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. Joshua said to all the people, long ago your ancestors, and then he went into a long history lesson about God's faithfulness. And then he says this, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. When it comes to hope, you actually look forward by looking backward. Trusting in nothing other than God's character. Hope is the ability to look forward because we can also look back and see what God has done. We're rooted in God's character of goodness and faithfulness to us. That doesn't always mean we get everything we wanted, obviously. But when we believe that God's character is for us, then we can be a hopeful people. Psalm 39:7 said this, and now, O Lord, what else can I kavah for? For you are my yakal. You are my hope. What else can I hope? Because you are my hope. Psalm 39:7. Now that's hope kind of with more of an Old Testament lens, more of an Old Testament perspective. But the hope in the New Testament actually is even better, to be honest with you. Because the New Testament says that Jesus is our living hope. The earliest followers of Jesus, they cultivated this similar habit of hope in God that the Old Testament ancestors had, but they also, and this gave them an advantage, they also believed that Jesus' life, death, and resurrection was God's response to our slavery to both evil and death. The empty tomb, and this is key to hope, the empty tomb opened a new door of hope for them. It seems like in the Old Testament, their hope was only just fueled by the hard times that they had. But after the cross, there was a new door for hope. You know, look about the life of the disciples. After the crucifixion, they're completely wrecked. They're scared. There's zero hope. After the resurrection, they are hopeful people. They are hopeful people on steroids after the resurrection. Now, the New Testament didn't use the same language, obviously, as the Old Testament. They used the Greek word elpis, E-L-P-I-S in English, elpis, to describe this anticipation. It can be defined this way. It's an expectation of good. It's a hope. It's our joyful and confident expectation again. Now, for them, it was an expectation of eternal salvation, not an easy life. That's kind of what Americans do. Our hope isn't only in our salvation. Our hope is that we can have an easy life as well. And that just says something more about us, I guess. The New Testament followers of Jesus, and so should we, see Jesus as the author of hope. He is the foundation of the thing hoped for. So whatever you're hoping for, the foundation of that hope is Jesus. Peter tied hope and resurrection together. In 1 Peter 1:3 he said, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. For Jesus' resurrection allows a living hope that people can be reborn and become new, different kind of humans. So for Peter, hope and the resurrection are tied together. He could have hope because of the resurrection. Now for Paul, there was hope and glory. He tied those two things together. Romans 5:2, though through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace, we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Our hope needs to be tied to the glory of God. Colossians 1:27, God has chosen to make known the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. The bigger your understanding of God and his glory, the easier it is for you to be hopeful. Paul says the good news about Jesus announces this elpis of glory. The elpis is based on the person, the risen Jesus, who has overcome death. So hope is tied to the resurrection. That's why we can be hopeful. And for Paul, it's tied to the glory of God. If you're not a hopeful person, if you're kind of a defeated, pessimistic, just kind of down all the time, what does that say about the glory that dwells within you? And conversely, the bigger your understanding of God's glory, I think the bigger your hope is going to be. Hope is not just a personal desire. It's not just a personal thing. Romans 8, listen to this. You know the verse. Probably know the passage. You've heard it before. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation awaits an eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope of what? In hope that the creation itself will be liberated from the bondage of decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. All creation is affected. All creation is hopeful. The apostles believed that the resurrection was a foretaste of what God planned to do for the whole universe. We need to think about hope in more of a grand scale and not just our own personal desires, our own personal wishes, our own personal walk. Hope is bigger than that. Christian hope and the world hope. I'm so glad that the Christian hope is something that's so much more solid than just the world's hope. Biblical hope is not an optimism based on our positive wishful thinking, but it's based on God's character. Our hope just isn't something that we can kind of put together in our own head, conceive of in our head, trying to always be positive, always trying to be optimistic about situations and circumstances. Our hope is based on God's character. Christian hope is waiting for humanity and the entire universe to be rescued from evil and from death. So again, hope plays out in a grand scale, not just in your own personal life. It's a decision to wait for God to bring about an expected future. Isn't that a great line? I didn't say it very poetically, but hope is the decision to wait for God to bring about an expected future. Again, it's waiting on something, not wishing for. It's waiting on, not wishing for. It's waiting on God. It's not wishing for things to change. Our hope is based on Easter, which is only possible because of Christmas. And I think that's why the church has used the word hope as one of their Advent words. We need to be a hopeful people. And Christmas, again, Christmas and Easter are tied together in ways that we probably don't think about on an each and everyday basis, but maybe they should be. Hope and Christmas are tied together because Easter gives us a hope. That's what the biblical words for hope are all about. Looking at God and believing that He's working His plan. We have some questions to kind of ponder and to think on a little bit this weekend. And the first one is this: what is your level of hope from 1 to 10. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world and a lot of disconcerting things going on. I don't want to downplay any of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, but you need to ask, what is your level of hope? And over the last 18 months, 2 years, I think people, if they're honest, their scores might have been a bit lower than they were before. So what is your level of hope on a scale of 1 to 10? But then also, why that score? Just don't give the score. Think why. Okay, why has the situation in the news, the situation in our country, the things that have gone on, why have those things affected my level of hope? Especially when you think of it in the context of what we've just talked about, what hope is. It's an expectation of God, not just wishing for the world. What does, and this is a more poignant question, what does your score indicate about your faith and your trust in God? If you're honest and your score is kind of low, what does that say about your level of trust or understanding of God's plan? You might have a lot of faith and trust, but just not fully understand his plan. None of us do. Here's another question. What is your hope based on? Is your hope based on circumstances or on God? Ooh, that's a challenge one for all of us if we're going to be honest. What is your hope based on? Is it based on God and his character or the circumstances and the situations that you find in? The last question, and we trust that the Holy Spirit might impart a thought into your head on this one. What situation do you need hope for? All right, now think about your own personal life, your own family life, your own work situation. What's going on in your life that you need hope for? And then how about this question? What does God think about that very same situation? So whether it's something big playing out in our country or something playing out in your own home, what does God think about that very same situation? And if you come to the realization that God is for you, then I think hope is going to be easier to walk in. So that's our first word of Advent, the word hope. We need to be a hopeful people. We need to be a positive and optimistic people. And that means being positive and optimistic because we believe who God is, not just because the news plays out the way that we hope it would or think that it should. It's much more. All right, well, again, thanks for joining us. Take care, and God bless. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.